everyone, welcome back to the channel. Have you ever wondered about inflation and how it affects the housing market?
We're all hearing about inflation on eggs and gas and things like that, but how does it affect the housing market? Let's dive right in.
I'm Vickie.
And I'm Jim, and we're at the Bishop team bringing you real estate information that you need, whether it's here in Orange County or across the country. We're here for you.
Okay, so the first question is, what is shelter inflation and why does it matter?
Good question, because you don't hear about it a lot, but shelter inflation is basically the housing inflation component of the Consumer Price Index, CPI. It accounts for almost a third of inflation, so it's a very significant thing. How do they come up with that number? This is where it gets a little murky. They ask tenants what they're paying for rent, and then they ask homeowners, if you were to rent your house out, what would you rent it for? So those numbers aren't really all that statistically accurate in some opinions, but that's where they come up with it. And because it's a third of the inflation index, it can really influence it. Now, the good news is towards the end of 2024, going into 2025, shelter inflation rate has been going down a little bit. So that's good news. If that helps bring down the overall rate of inflation, that's going to roll into point number 2, which is the federal funds rate.
Tell me about the federal funds rate, Jim.
So the Federal Reserve, or the Fed as it often is called, helps set the federal funds reserve rate. And that's what, not the mortgage rate, but it's what overnight lending rates and banks charge each other for funds. That Fed rate does have a direct impact on auto loans and credit cards, and kind of those shorter term loans. It doesn't affect the mortgage rate directly, but it has influence over it. The other thing to keep in mind, if inflation is high, the government is also paying a higher interest rate for the national debt. So lower interest rates do benefit not only you and me personally, but it also keeps our overall debt down. So there is a desire to keep interest rates lower. Now, the Fed, since we hit high inflation a couple of years ago, has been trying to pump the brakes on the economy and other economic factors so that inflation comes down. Their target is 2%, and we were 10, 20%, whatever we were officially. They want it down to 2%. We are getting closer to that, and again, as the housing component comes down, that will get us closer to our target, which is good.
Okay, so Jim, if inflation is getting pushed down, how is that going to eventually affect me in an interest rate on my mortgage? What's going on with that?
So in theory, what should happen is interest rates on mortgages should come down. There's another component we'll throw in here just to confuse you, and that's the spread between the 10-year and mortgage rates. It's been 1% higher than what it has been traditionally. So let's look at this graph. You have the Consumer Price Index, which is kind of measuring inflation, and the Fed rate. If inflation goes up, the Fed is going to raise rates to try and get the inflation down. And you can see they correlate pretty closely. The Fed has been they've been behind the Consumer Price Index, trying to get inflation down, but we're kind of starting to get ahead of that. So we should see not only short-term rates coming down, but also mortgage rates.
Okay, well then that's good news.
Yes.
So tell me, Jim, all this technical talk, what does that mean for like me, the real person?
So if you're a buyer and inflation cools off and mortgage rates come down, that can help you purchase that home for less money on a monthly basis because less is going to interest rate. So that's huge for buyers. For sellers, it can be good news too for 2 reasons. One, you might now have more buyers interested in your property, so increases the chance you're going to sell it. It could increase demand and get you a little bit more money. But second thing is, if you are selling and then buying, now you're a buyer and you get the benefit of that as well.
Sure, that's great. And if interest rates hadn't come down yet or aren't down, it's still not a bad time to buy because you can buy and refinance later. And when you're in that buying situation, you're competing against fewer buyers.
So that can work in your favor, assuming that you might be able to refinance in the future. But if you can buy it and it's within your budget now, that you shouldn't overly concern yourself with the interest rate, but the payment.
Right. Okay, Jim, let's bring this all the way home to the Southern California market.
So if we look in Southern California, high mortgage rates have hit everybody across the country, but we feel it probably a little bit more here because the higher price point that we see LA, Orange County, San Diego. So if we see lower interest rates in the future, that should spur the activity in our market, free up sellers, free up buyers, so that we can have more people buying and selling, which increased demand could then raise prices ahead of inflation. Right now, inflation, housing's been going up kind of with inflation or caused by inflation somewhat, but that would be more demand driven.
So it'd be like more people are invited to the party. There's a few more people out there on the dance floor.
Getting them off the fence.
Good.
So as inflation comes down and interest rates should soften because of that, we will see more activity in the market, more choices for buyers, more buyers for sellers, and that should help unclog the housing market that we've had kind of clogged up here in Southern California. So good news for a lot of people. Helping you navigate that market is what we're here for. So as you're getting closer to making those decisions relative to housing, give us a call. That's what we're here for. I'm Jim.
I'm Vickie.
And we're with the Bishop team, your leading realtors here in Orange County, California.
Helping you make the right move. Give us a shout.